All right, so I apologize. I accidentally pressed the wrong key, so I actually have to redo this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and start from the top, and hopefully it sounds as good. This is the Letter to the Left podcast. My name is Nolan Hesse. This is a podcast about trying to explain kind of what's going on and the big narratives, and trying to expose the big narratives going on between both sides of the political spectrum here in America, and then also like crunching down on more of the truth of big events that are going on in this country, and a in-depth or semi-in-depth analysis as to why things are the way they are. Please like and subscribe, because again, like, I'm trying to do this as much as I can. I have a real job on the outside, so please like and subscribe. Get shares, show your family, friends, or whatever if they're interested in politics or what the hell's going on. And yeah, so just enjoy it. And today is a special one. We're going to talk about the Epstein Files. And the Epstein Files, and what did they mean and how were they used? And when I'm talking about the how were they used part, that's more of like a, hey, were these used as a political weapon for a long time, and were these used as more of a psyop, either by our own government, which is 100% true, and then also by foreign adversaries, which again is 100% true. Whether or not there's faults on either side on if there's actually a directive or if this was a lone thing, that's the key. But what I want to get into before we start this is giving kind of a background of the hysteria and the narrative. We've talked about context before in here and how headlines are inflammatory inherently, and that's to push ratings and propaganda. We have seen so far since these 3 million pages came out that everyone who is implicated is guilty, which is just not true. A lot of the headlines are using the term implicated, or even the terms mentioned in the Epstein Files, because of the bubbling up that this has done over the last several years, this conspiracy theory, right? They're using that as a strategic weapon with the narrative of, oh, everyone that we say is mentioned in the Epstein Files is part of the pedophile ring, which just isn't true. A little bit of background. Jeffrey Epstein was a financier. Not only that, he had a charter business that was kind of his cover business, where he had a fleet of private jets essentially that he leased out to celebrities and politicians and to do their personal or business work. So when people talk about like, oh, like this guy touched everyone, all right? And I don't mean literally. I mean, he did eventually, but you know what I'm saying? Like, when people talk about, and when you see like pictures of people with Epstein, you got to think of it like when you were in college or high school, even when you had a house party, right? There were people that came to those parties that you didn't even associate with. But when you went there, you're drunk or high and you're like, oh my gosh, like, it's good, so good to see you. Or they talk to people that you normally don't talk to. That's kind of how this was, especially in that time, like the 1990s to the 2000s. The party scene for adults was very much, it was very like together. Does that make sense? Like, it was very like interoperable, kind of like business elites on Wall Street hung out with Hollywood elites, and Hollywood elites hung out with major athletes and politicians. Like, it was all together, right? And it still kind of is today. It's a little bit more segregated than it used to be, but you know, still what I'm saying. So when people sit there and they try to use these pictures or they push all this propaganda over social media, what they forget to leave out of the context, and they do it on purpose, is that all these people at some point saw Epstein. He was literally that well known and that well integrated with society's like top tier everything. So when you have all these things going on, like I bring up that specific because a lot of the people on the left brought up Donald Trump. And if you knew anything and you actually like read into their history, they were more adversarial. They did not like each other. And the files that were just recently released, 3 million pages, kind of go into that a little bit. It kind of dives into that a little bit, and you kind of see it. But like the amount of narratives and stuff that we've seen with the propaganda about all these people that were quote unquote, you know, mentioned, and they're using it as some sort of like inflammatory statement. When you add context, it was like the vast majority of them were not implicated, like truly implicated. Like the files themselves, what were they? A lot of it was just personal discussions with Epstein or someone else, a two-way, not like a group. And it was a lot of just shit talking. Like, to be honest with you, it was a lot of shit talking. It was a lot of, I'm shit talking on this guy, and like emails back and forth. It was like a game chat almost. Like, it was insane. It was like there's really only so many implications. And that was my thought process going through it. I was like, dude, there's a lot of fluff to this. Like, there's a lot of just him talking shit about someone else. Jerry Nadler, right? Him talking shit on Trump. Him talking shit on all these other people that he just was just roasting with someone else over email. And that's what they talk about and mention. And I just think that's so stupid. Because what both political sides have done with the Epstein Files, they have strategically used them and slow rolled these on each side to both protect people that have been associated with them and to also use them as a weapon for future reference to be like, oh, this guy's in it and he's not. Again, perfect example, Donald Trump, right? The left has, first of all, didn't care about him for a long time as a conspiracy theory, and then all of a sudden they care about him, and just because one off-brand source ended up not being true and not credible, said that he was mentioned in them. And then he came out and said this was a big nothing burger. And then they were like, oh, he's hiding something, right? And then it became like, oh, well, Donald Trump, he's in the Epstein Files. And they had to use that. But then they wouldn't vote to release them in entirety for a while. And then all the judges that were voting to unseal documents were refusing to, and they were all liberal judges. That's what I'm talking about. And the right and the left both did it. I'm not saying that it's just one side. I'm just using the big major picture that makes the news because, again, we do have a leftist media. So they're going to broadcast that shit out. But it was on both sides. My initial thought when I came into this was that there was a pedophile ring. For years, I actually believed that, and I thought, okay, this is a thing. And then when Donald Trump got in, and all of a sudden started saying, well, there's nothing in here, there's nothing of value in here, I started to get suspicious, and not against Donald Trump, but against the idea of it being a psyop. Why? Because you could really do a lot of damage to an institution or a country if you make it seem like that everything they believe in is fake, wrong, and completely like backwards. Very well could be. But that was a thought process that came through my mind. And then I started thinking, what if Trump campaigned on this promise, because he did, and then when they got there, they realized that, oh, this is fucking nothing, but we have to give something to our constituents. So we have to either slow roll this out, or we have to just outright say there's nothing in here and hope that this does not become a debate. Or in the worst case scenario, you say it's not, and then the opposition automatically wants it, and then it becomes a multi-month, if not year, slow roll of battling to release, redact again, like files and shit like that. People think like that. Like, at this level, people do think like in tertiary and further effects. 100% that went in their minds. Because when you actually look at the files and just ignore all the bullshit headlines that you're seeing right now, like, there are some heinous things accusing those files right now. I'm not debating that. But the volume of it is so much fluff. It's so much Epstein personal conversation with someone else over email and him just talking shit. And it's people talking shit back. There's only very few accusatory things that actually have value. Like, for example, Jay-Z, who, again, he was the only one that the source that actually alleged this was a credible source. Even the Bush accusation of the raping of the 13-year-old boy, that had suspect to the actual value of what it was, right? So you start to look at this stuff and you're like, what's real and what's not? You just don't fucking know. You know, you just don't anymore, because it's like, and that's what I'm worried about, is that's part of it, right? So I started to get into the thought process, maybe this is a giant psyop. You know, what if it is? What if the admin isn't trying to hide anything? They're just trying to use it as a political ploy right before the midterms. And also the Democrats as well. to slow roll these, unredact these, re-redact certain things, and it just turns out to be a bunch of bullshit. I mean, look at the Trump accusation. When the first 3 million pages came out, so many leftist accounts on X were quoting that one about the 13-year-old girl. And then they didn't even copy the footnote under it, because every single accusation from a outside source, not like the conversations, but the outside source, every single one of them had a footnote on the legitimacy of the source after the fact. And that one was like, this source was deemed non-credible and recommended for psychiatric help. Right there. Like, and the only other talking about Donald Trump that we know now was adversarial. And what I mean by that is, again, if you actually read into the history, Donald Trump called the cops on Epstein multiple times. He banned him from Mar-a-Lago, and then even went to court, testified against him, and also did a bunch of other stuff because Jeffrey ended up trying to hit on one of his waitresses at Mar-a-Lago, and that's when he found out about the other shit. So there's a history there. And they also had a bidding war over Mar-a-Lago. So, like, they used to real estate battle in the same area of Florida. So, like, there's some history. And adversarial at best. Like, and you saw the quote, like, he's an evil man. Like, Epstein did not like people who were more powerful than him. And back in that day, Trump was the thing. If you really, like, know anything about the culture of America back then, like, he was the guy. Like, he was the big kahuna. When it comes, everyone knew who Donald Trump was. So, again, there's a lot of fluff. So, like, be careful when you see the narrative pushing of this person's mentioned the Epstein. It's like, but how are they mentioned? Why are they mentioned? Is this just a side quest of Jeffrey Epstein talking about some bullshit and, like, you know, some email that he sends to someone else? There are some accusatory things. Again, Bush Sr., Jay-Z, Bill Clinton, obviously. I want to get to something else, though. And this is where I think the admin is really trying to downplay, because of the influence of certain countries. You can tear down a country really easily if you fund and do a lot of this shit. There's always been accusations of Obama and that administration having ties with Chinese influence, with enemy influence in general. But the word Goyim comes up a lot. Now, I've always said Jeffrey Epstein was likely some sort of Mossad agent, 100%, because, like, his history is just there. Ghislaine Maxwell, what her dad was an informant for the CIA. He was also a Mossad agent, one of the first. So it's like, all that stuff exists. There's no way that this is that big and powerful without some sort of national backing. People just don't do that. And with our influence and what Israel has influence on United States politics, 100% there's some sort of tie there. Whatever that purpose is, we kind of know, but we really don't, right? Like, we can sit there and speculate, be like, they wanted to blackmail politicians and all this to pass their laws, sure. But again, the amount of actual accusations is hard to come by in those files, because a lot of the sources are just not credible. You know, a lot of them have bad reactions to drugs after parties, and they ended up recanting it. And then also, again, like, there's all these things, right? There's all these pageantry things going on. You see Marjorie Taylor Greene and you see Thomas Massey. I respect both of them for the most part, but, like, they talked about months ago about them going onto the floor and reading out the names of his actual client list. There's probably not a real client list. I just want to let that known. There's probably not a legitimate client list. There are implications in said files, but the client list itself, there's probably not a piece of paper or book that just have all these clients' names and stuff. Because, again, someone that big and that powerful doing that kind of thing, if the conspiracy theory is logical and linear, then they wouldn't hold it in some sort of paper book. All right? Does that make sense? Like, think about it. Like, that reeks of compromise. So when we talk about, like, Epstein clients, there's probably implications that have value in those files that the sources in the files are validated. That's probably when they mean the client list. What does that mean to us? Well, who's funding it? Why are they funding it? And what are they doing with it? Well, again, the term Goyim comes up. And if you all know what Goyim is, if you know anything about Judaism and the architecture of the Jewish state, you know that goyim is a derogatory term for non-Jew. It's very similar to how Muslims use infidel. The only two religions on the planet that actually believe in the construct of goyim or infidel, like non-believers should be killed or raped or murdered, are Jewish religion and Islamic religion. That's not a slight, that's just a reality. If you read anything from the Talmud, it says that verbatim. Multiple different sources in the Talmud say, reference goyim as being no different from cattle. It's okay to rape and pillage and murder as many goyim as you can. All that. That's very common. So when you have Jeffrey Epstein, who is a known of Jewish descent, and he's using goyim however many times. Again, goyim is used very, very consistently throughout. That's where you get that consistency that you're talking about, not these one or two off accusations. What does that tip? You have people like Ben Shapiro and Ted Cruz. They're sitting there going, this is Russia. He was associated with Russia. It looks almost like they're covering up for some sort of Israel operation. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But if I know anything about Ted Cruz, he's paid off completely by Israel and completely compromised by Israel. If you, like, look, again, I'm more conservative. Ted Cruz is 100% compromised by Israel. Ben Shapiro is 100% some sort of Israeli asset. If you ever watch their stuff, they're unapologetic. And everything is about Israel. It's not even hidden anymore. The difference is we live in a world of social media, and you live in a world of instant information where you can find those videos and where everything that they seem to talk about is the same shit. It's Israel, this, Israel, that. Israel needs all of our everything. So, like, why is that a thing? That's where we need to start asking questions. We need to start following the bread trail of who's funding this ring, if there is said ring and it's so broad. Because, again, there's all this misinformation out there. There's all these media outlets on both sides using this as some sort of political psyop and essentially also causing a deterioration of what we believe in the American institution. That helps adversaries. And, again, Israel is not necessarily an ally. I know people want to call them that. They are not an ally. They are not fully adversarial, but they are semi-adversarial in a lot of ways. That's a fact. They're the only adversary that we actually fund. So when we talk about this kind of stuff, you have to start trying to follow the breadcrumbs of who's funding this and why. Could it be blackmail for politicians? Could it be anything? So you start thinking about who's accused in it. Like I talked about Bush Sr., Jay-Z, Bill Clinton, obviously. But there's also other people that have been, quote unquote, implicated, not accused, but implicated, like John Legend, Chrissy Teigen, Katy Perry. Like there's the list goes on and on. But what does any of that actually mean? They definitely all jade towards one political side. When you start touching the dots of what Epstein believed in, allegedly, right? Per the files, per what the conspiracy theories tell us, and then what we've seen American culture deteriorate to. I'm talking specifically about the mutilation of children, the understanding and breakdown of the family, and the breakdown of the idea that kids are not, or that kids are a blessing and instead they're actually a hindrance. And then you start looking at some of the accusations of, like, even to the point of killing and sacrificing kids and eating them and stuff like that in the files. You can connect the dots because, like, the liberal side is far more anti-child and anti-family than the right is. That's just a fact. Like, there is no denying that. And when you talk about the distortion of what we think reality is when it comes to gender dysmorphia and stuff like that, and what they believe in, that kids should be able to get these surgeries and kids should be able to be completely exposed to sexual shit way early on, you start to see the connected dots of who funds who. All right? And it gets almost sickening because then you start to think about what's real and what's not. You know, you do. Because that's the reality we're living in. It's like, is this a SOP? Is it a political rollout? Was it created by the Democrats, this whole thing? Was it not? Like, was this an actual national security thing where it was Mossad and CIA doing things to essentially undermine some sort of other adversary? Like, what is going on? They're going to be known. But you got to be careful of the pageantry. Because, again, you got even people like Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene who look like good guys. But why are you taking so long? You said this months ago that you were going to go out there on the floor and read off the names of these clients, and we haven't seen it yet. It's been 4.5, 5 months, dude. Like, where are you? You know, you said you were going to do this, and you're waiting for redactions. You act like you're so powerful about it, and then all of a sudden, what are you doing here? You know? So that kind of raises a red flag. Like, it seems a lot of, even he's slow rolling it for pageantry's sake, for political gain, stuff like that. Going into his midterm, too, like you think about who he's going against now, which is Trump's super PAC for primaries, all of a sudden it's starting to look like he's weaponizing this. You know, he's using this for his own game, because if he can get it close enough to the midterms, then he's going to have an advantage, because no one's going to fucking outvote the guy who led the charge to unredact all the Epstein files. And no one, to include you and me, are going to read all 3 million pages of that thing to know the whole and absolute truth. And to be honest, the 3 million pages plus whatever's left probably doesn't have the whole truth. A lot of that truth is destroyed. Why the hell, if there is something that bad and damning that the U.S. government and all these world institutions were involved in, why would there be writing in it? Why would they keep that around? Why would they keep anything around that you can just delete or burn or whatever? They would completely destroy it, which is what I'm saying. That kind of leans into is this a political psyop on both sides? Or, hell, is it an adversarial psyop? You got Russia talking about the Satanism of the West now. You got China talking about the Satanism of the West now. Is this a strategic plan where we have adversarial beneficiaries in our Congress working this to expose, quote unquote, this, to use this to where the average American will either rise up and completely topple the U.S. or where they will choose not to fight for the U.S.? Both very possible and very serious things. Like, you start to break that shit down, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit. Is this like a 4D chess thing that our adversaries are playing at? You know, 100% it could be. We don't know. You know, we have no idea. All this stuff is conspiracy theory led. That is semi-true. Like, don't get me wrong. There's 100% truth to this. But who is funding it to use it later? Who is actually funding it to use it later? Or maybe this is just all false. Maybe this is all just a printed document that they keep creating. And who knows? It could be U.S. It could be the U.S. It literally could be our own government working against us to pit the American people against each other, to actually exploit our differences to create more, like, detrimental policies to get more control. 100% something else that could be a thing. Because the timing of the slow rollouts is just, it doesn't make any sense. Again, why would you hold on to this? Like, this is a very popular thing. The Democrats held on to it the whole Biden's term. They were the ones saying it didn't exist. Everyone was on the left. They were saying this is all fake because there were more Democrats, and there are more Democrats implicated in it. 100%. There's more photos of official photos of, like, the Obamas, for example, the famous one in the Oval Office of Obama and Epstein and Hillary Clinton. You know, that's very famous, talking about things. This was after his first, like, they knew who he was, right? So, like, there's something going on here. So you need to be careful of what headlines you read, because every single fake, propagandized, whether you're left or right, media is using this to get ratings. And they're gonna blast out every single thing that you can possibly think of in an inflammatory way. And that's shocking. Again, what we need to hone in on, in my opinion, who is funding this? Is it real? Again, did these actions actually happen? Or is this all paid off? Is this all theater, pageantry, and fake in order to create something to either for everyone to rally behind or to use to divide us and conquer? Is this our own government, or is this adversarial? We don't know. We just don't. Everything can be true. Everything can be true at the same time, and nothing can be true at the same time. That's what scares me about this. So it seriously concerning, because here's also the problem. You have people who are saying, like Pam Bondi, we cannot unredact some of these because it would destroy the system. And then you have people going, good, burn the system to the ground. That's what they want if it's adversarial. And that's scary. No one wants a civil war. I'm telling you right now. None of you want that. Like, if you think that this shit happens and you just completely tear down the whole system, you are going to watch your kids starve. Because we're way too dependent on that system now, and it's way too deep in the roots. If you uproot that, it would be the same thing as uprooting a giant oak tree that all the roots are your whole lawn. You're going to destroy your whole lawn. Like, I'm kidding you not. Supply chains are going to rot up. We're going to get conflicts all over the place that sense to weakness. You're going to get all sorts of shit. The dollar's going to collapse. You're not going to be able to buy food normally. Like, sure, you can hunt, but that's completely guessing, right? Like, you are going to watch your kids starve. You're going to watch your family suffer. You're going to watch your friends die because there's going to be conflicts, and everyone's going to spaz out to start. Like, I was talking to someone today at work about the possibility of a civil war. And they seemed all for it, right? It's all about gung-ho. This is going to be sick. It's like, dude, this isn't fucking Call of Duty. Like, I think we've been desensitized because of movies, media, and games. Like, this isn't going to be like Call of Duty. Like, you're going to have massive famine because no one here grows their own food for the most part. The world is going to collapse. Like, if America collapses, the world is going to collapse in a complete chaos. Criminals and gangs are going to completely go rampant. You're going to get major crime. Everyone's going to freak out to start. Like, there's going to be mass hysteria. No one's going to supply like, you're not just going to be able to walk into a grocery store and get food. Like, that's not going to exist. There's the whole reason why doomsday preppers are a thing, right? Like, and if you don't have any tactical skills or technical skills, you're not going to be able to hunt for your food. You're not going to be able to fight off other people. Like, if you think that you're going to survive that initial wave, you're wrong. The vast majority of people are going to die within the first 2 weeks of a civil conflict. Because, again, it's not like North and South, like the 1860s, where everyone's in a uniform and all this stuff, and there's gentlemen's agreements, and there's, like, honor. None of that exists anymore. This is asymmetrical. You're talking about you could be living right next to, like, my neighbor is a huge liberal. You could be living right next to the enemy. Like, you could be living right next to them. And if you have a family, you don't know what they're going to do. They may be very nice people. You don't know that. What happens when that kind of stress and need to live happen. We've never seen that on that kind of scale. So if you think at all that you want a civil war, you're a fucking idiot. Because there's nothing guaranteed after that. Like, it's almost guaranteed you're going to wake up tomorrow. I know what you're saying. Like, oh, that's not guaranteed. It's almost guaranteed you're going to get something to eat, for your next meal. That's not guaranteed if that shit happens. They're not going to keep supply chains rolling. They're not going to. There's so much government infrastructure, which is a problem. Don't get me wrong. There's so much government infrastructure in that shit. If you think that you are going to have some sort of glorious civil war that, like, you're going to be able to do all this cool shit and you're going to have, like, no. I talked to a buddy of mine today. And in our profession, it's not necessarily, well, we're okay with taking someone out, right? Because it's part of the job. When it comes, like, we're military, right? So that's part of the job. But he goes, I asked him, I said, you don't want that smoke. And he said, I kind of do. It'd be sick. And I'm like, no, it wouldn't. What are you going to do when you're trying to go on a mission to get your food and you come across a father and his two daughters? His daughters are 3 and 6 years old. They're not armed. They're not anything. But they put their hands up. And they need food too. What are you going to do? Think about that. You know what he said? He said, I'm going to ice them down. I said, you're going to fucking kill them. Like, they're not threatening you. And he said, yeah. But see, that's the reality of it is he says that, right? We don't know if that's actually true when he sees that. But he could be. And that's the dangerous people you have to deal with that you think you could trust. And you don't. promise you don't want that smoke. Which is why be careful with that construct of we got to start a burning system in the ground. You have to be careful with that. Because if it is adversarial, or even if it's our government, that's exactly what they fucking want. They want an excuse to either do martial law if it's our own government, or they want an excuse to have the people completely dismantle this country and then they can swoop in on being the world power. Whether it's Russia, China, Israel, doesn't matter. That 100% can be a thing. You have to be careful. Because again, there ain't no, like, if that cat comes out of the bag and it does burn down the system, like, we're all going to suffer greatly. Your families are not going to be intact. All right? Because, like, again, I have 2 daughters. I have a daughter that's going on 2 and a daughter that's going on 6. I'm skilled with a weapon, and I know what I need to do. You're also going against guys like that. So you're going against the psychopaths like the guy I told you about, and then you're also going against guys like me who have no choice but to put his daughters first. You think I'm going to let you live versus my daughters? My biggest fear would be watching them starve in my arms as they cried themselves asleep and eventually cried themselves to death because they didn't get enough food or something and they couldn't survive. Or the heat's off, and guess what? It's winter now and they freeze to death. I refuse to let that happen. So you have to think about that when you're talking about burning out the system. You can't just think about, oh, this is going to be sick like Call of Duty. That's very ignorant. It's very stupid. So don't go around talking about that stuff like that. We have to take a logical approach and on how to get these people for what they do. I have a soft spot towards children. All right? I see the innocent in them, and I do not like it when children suffer. I definitely don't like it when children suffer unneededly. I'm one of the guys that believes that the pedophile should be thrown into the chipper. I'm that guy. But I also understand to save everyone else, you can't just go fucking full gung-ho Civil War style shit. Because you're going to kill a lot more people that way than Epstein ever could. This is tactful. You have to be smart. You have to be smarter than these people. Okay, so be careful. Double check accusations online because, again, a lot of this is inflammatory and a lot of it is meant to be that way. There's a lot of adversarial bots online that are pushing these kind of headlines that don't have any context to it to inflame you. Whether it's true or not, you have to keep your bearing. You have to, especially if you're a man. If you're a young man, you have to keep your bearing. Because again, you don't want that smoke. No, you don't. You know, you're going to sit there and say, yeah, I do. No, you fucking don't. I promise you, you don't. If you even survive that first wave, you're probably going to kill yourself from the shit that you had to do or see to get there. You're not bred for that, bub. It doesn't matter how great you are at whatever. It doesn't matter if you're a military man like me. You haven't seen it. Like, you haven't even seen it. Even if you're a veteran of Afghanistan, Iraq, you have not seen this shit. You have not seen your neighbors, your neighborhood kids get slaughtered, raped, pillaged, murdered by terrible people, and there's nothing to enforce it. You have not seen that style of shit. These are people that are intricate. This is where you come to be safe, right? And then you see that breakdown, you're not ready for that, I promise you. So that's my warning. Like, and I want this one, if there's a one to go viral, I want this one to go viral. You have to think through this, okay? If this is true, and the conspiracy side is true, you have to be tactful and not lose your bearing because you have to outsmart these people. Obviously, they got away with it, and they're very powerful and rich. You can't just go scorched earth. All right? As much as I want to, trust me. All right? Be careful of fake pictures. The one with the 2 chickens and the kid, that's from a movie. We fact-checked that earlier. That's from a fucking movie. All right? Again, bot accounts are spreading shit everywhere to try to inflame shit, which is why I'm thinking more of the adversarial psyop. And on that, if it is the adversarial psyop that I'm concerned it is, you can't let them win. You can fucking hate the system all you want. We live in it and it's fucking deep. But you can't just uproot it all at once. just because some files that you don't even trust the government. Again, like, for how many weeks have you guys been sitting here saying you don't trust the government on the Epstein Files and they're covering it up? And then all of a sudden they release it and you're like, oh, I believe all this stuff. It's like, what? It's like, now you believe it? How do you know that they're a fucking lying? How do you know that none of these are altered? How do you know that these 3 million pages is why it took so long for them to do it? Because they were typing it up and making this a thing. You know? All this stuff. We essentially got all this shit exposed to us, and we know nothing about it. Absolutely fucking nothing. So be careful, because the last thing I want is to watch my children suffer, let alone your children. Like, I don't want any of that. I care about the world that my daughters grew up in, or will grow up in, the similar one I had. I had a very middle-class, normal upbringing. My parents were loving parents. I had great siblings. We had a great childhood. We had great education, all that. I want my daughters to experience that too, where we were prideful in the USA. We were prideful in this country. We were prideful for what we were doing and how we were living. Okay? So you have to keep your bearing. And we have to actually find the truth to this instead of just buying into all this fucking fluff that half of it is photoshopped, faked, or whatever. All right? So, anyway, like and subscribe, please. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead, DM me, or, comment on the video. And that's what I like. So, hopefully you guys listen to this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you later. Bye.